So you might ask yourself, how can a system that destroys agriculture by insisting on inefficient central planning and destroys industry by insisting on inefficient central planning, that punishes the most productive people in agriculture by calling them kulaks and deporting them to Siberia or just killing them, or that punishes workers and managers who are honest and say you can't make steel without iron and coal for being honest and calls them counter-revolutionary spies, wreckers, and saboteurs. How can a system like that actually work? And the answer is terror. Remember, terror, Robespierre says that virtue without terror is useless. Well, there's plenty of terror in the Soviet Union. During the Civil War, the secret police of the Communist Party is called the Cheka. They then are called the GPU. They then get their name changed to the NKVD. Finally, the KGB, which is where Putin comes from. Putin is and always will be a KGB colonel, a thug. The secret police has total power to investigate anyone except the boss and the boss's name. In fact, they investigate everyone. They have files on everyone. The more important you are, the more they have in their file. The less important, the less they have. But everyone has a file. Everyone's recorded. Everyone's observed. It's worse now in communist China because they have modern technology provided by Microsoft and Apple and a bunch of other American tech companies. But you don't need all that to have the kind of universal totalitarian repression that Stalin achieves in communist Russia. All you need is a willingness and a group of people who will do the wet work for you. That's a euphemism. I love those. For killing. So, in the 5-year plan, I'm out of the camera side. I was gone for a moment. Where was I? Did I even exist? Ask Schrodinger's cat. In the 5-year plan, the NKVD, I'm just going to use that term because that's what it was throughout most of the 30s and 40s. The NKVD, the Soviet political secret police, goes after farmers and workers. But there are people within the Communist Party that aren't so sure that Stalin is doing the right thing. Or at least Stalin's afraid of that. He's afraid of a cabal, a group of people within the party who will fight him. So Stalin engages in what's known as the purges. And in Soviet parlance, the purges are when you take Communist Party officials that have been involved in affairs since the revolution or before, discover their treason, and find out who they're working with. In other words, get them to name names and accuse other people. The purges take Zinoviev and Kamenev. One of the heights of the purges is when Nikolai Bukharin, who had pulled away from political affairs to let Stalin have the limelight without any interference from him, when he was still targeted and killed. And the way these purges work, at first the leader of the secret police is a guy named Yagoda. But Yagoda is purged by his successor with Stalin's help, a very short fellow known as a dwarf by his peers. His name is Yezhov. And the terror around the Great Purges is called the Yezhovashchina, the reign of Yezhov. Now, in the Yezhovashchina, it's normal for people to leave home and disappear. They don't ever get to work. Or to leave work and disappear on their way home. Nobody knows where they are, what happened. Or in the middle of the night, and this is what often happened because Stalin was a night owl, he'd order the arrest of someone, or Yezhov would order the arrest of someone. And they'd be in bed with their family, and at 2 or 3 in the morning, or they'll just bust down the door, and you've got 2 minutes to get your stuff and go. And if you're lucky, it'll just be you, and not you and your whole family. Every night in the apartment buildings of the great and powerful within the Communist Party, the NKVD would come and take someone off. You could hear it through the walls. Everyone was in danger. No one was safe. But unlike Robespierre, Stalin's enemies weren't together. They couldn't organize. In fact, there were agents provocateurs, which is a fancy French term for spies who catch spies. And they catch spies by acting like revolutionaries. They act like rebels. They act like people disaffected with Stalin to try to draw other people who are really disaffected with Stalin into their orbit, and then they are arrested and revealed as traitors. The agent provocateur has done his job. No one trusts anyone. No one is safe. Now, this is accompanied, yes, I'm gone again, by a change in every printed word. This is a book called The Comrade Vanishes. And what you see here is the same photograph, but edited time by time, purge by purge. The original photograph shows Stalin with a few Bolsheviks, but one of the Bolsheviks is purged. That's Kirov here, so you get rid of him, and you move this guy next to this guy. And then you just have these two. And then you just have Stalin. The Comrade Vanishes is a book filled with these propaganda photos that have been altered in order to reflect current reality. I'll have a link to this book in one of the gathers of assorted things that go with these videos. So not even is the past safe from redefinition. Everything is in flux. There is no reality. 2 + 2 is whatever the heck Comrade Stalin says it is. Who cares about math? We're into survival. So only the slavish survive. And many people who had integrity in the past, but are trying to act slavish now, don't survive because they had integrity in the past. Integrity is standing up for principles. Not in Stalin's Russia. You do what Comrade Stalin tells you to do, and you obey the reality that Comrade Stalin has. Andrei Vyshinsky becomes famous for being the prosecutor in a series of of recorded show trials. And Vyshinsky is famous for, bringing the poor witness in who's already been through torture and is just begging for either death or some kind of release. And he browbeats him as the guy there holds his own pants up because they don't trust him with a belt. Vyshinsky is vicious as he goes after these so-called enemies of the people. Finally, the Red Army itself, the military of the Soviet Union in the late 1930s, is purged of any officer that has a glimmer, a spark of creativity in the art of war. That's just before World War II. It's not going to work out well for Stalin, but he's sure that anyone with any brains or guts or willpower or vision or integrity has been purged from his Communist Party, and that he alone rules, and everyone else is kept in a state of existential flux and fear. Terror reigns in the Soviet Union. The Gulag is where you send people who fail to live up to Stalin's ideal. They are a series of concentration camps, not death camps, but they are slave labor camps where people are expected to be worked to death. The average life expectancy varies from time to time and from gulag to gulag, but basically most people die within the first 5 years as slave laborers. Some eke out a living for 15 or 20 years, but they remain slaves. There is a movie called The Way Out, 2010, The Way Back. Not the one with Ben Affleck that's this year, but The Way Back, 2010, which tells the story of several people who escaped from a gulag. Were we together, I'd be showing you a clip from that right now, but I'll try to have some clips on the associated page. The Gulag Archipelago is a book written later by a victim of the gulags, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who tells the story of Stalin's gulags and the gulags that existed in the Soviet Union up until the end of communism and that still exist under Putin. What's the goal of all of this? The goal of all of this is a future. Imagine the future as a boot pressing on a human face forever. That's from George Orwell's 1984. In other words, the permanent oppression of humanity, or the removal of the thinking processes of most people, turning them into drones, what Orwell in 84 calls double plus good duck speakers, people who parrot whatever the party says moment by moment. Eurasia is our ally. East Asia has always been our enemy. Eurasia is our ally. East Asia has always been our enemy, during the 2-minute hate where you shout whatever's on the screen, and then halfway through the meeting, East Asia is our ally. Eurasia has always been our enemy. East Asia is our ally. Eurasia has always been our enemy. And the cameras are spotting anyone who goes, huh? What was... No, you're not supposed to notice. You're not supposed to think. There's not supposed to be any independent judgment back here. You are literally like a mirror's reflection of whatever the party moment by moment decides is reality. I also recommend the film Testimony, which is a Ben Kingsley movie from 1987 about the composer Dmitri Shostakovich, which I also would be showing you extended clips from, or we hear together, but I'll include clips from that or a link to that movie in the associated documents. So, thus ends week 1's videos. We have traveled from the very last phases of World War I up through communist Russia just before World War II. We will next week explore totalitarianism in Italy, in Japan, and in Germany. Thank you for your hard work this week. I miss you all. I really, really do.